These notes are called, oh, let me go back a slide. Hang on. Oops. They are called a more perfect union notes, and they are the last set of notes we're going to take for this unit. It's not the end of the unit yet, but this is a pretty short unit. So take really good notes, okay? Because there's some pretty important information in here. Um, this is all about drafting the Constitution, taking the Articles of Confederation, our first draft at an official government, and turning it into something that's a little more workable. There's a little more authority tied into it. Okay. Um, this first slide is pretty much review from forming a new nation. Feel free to write it if you want the extra reminder, or just listen for a second. Okay. Um, Again, the Constitutional Convention takes place in Philadelphia in 1787, and the sole purpose of this convention, of this meeting, is rewriting, or not rewriting, editing the Articles of Confederation. Okay, taking that document that sets up the government but doesn't do quite enough and turning it into something that's a little more productive. Okay, write this down if you feel like you need it. I guarantee you will need to know what the purpose of this convention was. We've talked about that a little bit in forming a new nation. So if you think that's fine, feel free to skip. Okay. These next couple bullet points are all kind of nice to know. Most delegates to the convention were educated white men uh, who had some type of governmental experience. If they had no government experience, they at least had education, they at least had some experience uh, doing some type of work, whether that was a lawyer or a doctor or a business owner. They could read, they could write, they could communicate with one another pretty well. They could stand up and make a point. Okay. Um, Most of the delegates at the convention had served their state government or the national government in some way. So they'd served either at their own state level Congress or something like a Congress. Not every state had an official Congress, some called it something a little bit different. Um, or they'd been a delegate at one point to the national level Congress that was created under the Articles of Confederation. Some pretty famous founders of the United States did not come to this meeting. Founders like Thomas Jefferson, founders like John Adams, and Patrick Henry. Patrick Henry, especially, was very against this meeting. He thought that editing the Articles of Confederation was going to give the national level government too much power. So he was risking, or he thought we were risking, kind of creating a monster of government, something that we just fought a war to break away from just around 10 years before. So he was against it. Um, Also, feel free to pause this video to make sure you're getting the notes down that you need. Some of the issues at the convention, meaning some of the things that were up for debate, were first, just like the Continental Congresses that we talked about last unit, not every delegate wants exactly the same thing. Okay. Some delegates want just very small edits made to the Articles of Confederation. They think there's still things that work really well in that document. They just need to tweak it. Okay. Some people think that the articles were way too weak and we essentially need to chuck it out the window and totally rewrite it. Okay. We need something new. We need something completely different. What they come up with after lots and lots of debate is two plans of action. They create these different ideas and then they debate them and debate them and debate them and kind of halt the debate for a little bit because no one is willing to budge. The first of these plans is called the Virginia Plan. Okay, it's pretty important that you know that the Virginia Plan is all about population. Okay, so take a minute, write that down. With the Virginia Plan, something I want you to be aware of, again, we've talked about this before with the Articles of Confederation, but the Virginia Plan, actually, both of these plans uh, go a step in trying to preserve the sovereignty of states, so the authority of each state. Okay. Under the Virginia plan, and really the New Jersey plan that we'll talk about on the next slide, uh, both agree that some sovereignty, some authority needs to sit with the central or national level government. Okay. But we still want to know where our state level sovereignty is going to sit. We don't want that to go away either. In uh, the Virginia plan calls to kind of edit the legislature, so edit the Congress that exists because of the Articles of Confederation. The legislature, anytime you see legislature, I want you to think law. Okay, if I'm part of the legislature, I am part of the lawmaking process. Okay, the Virginia plan says let's take the Congress that we have and we're going to split it up into two groups. Okay, and that way they can get through issues a little differently, maybe with a little more time. Um, and that two group system or house system, a lot of times you hear it called two houses. That's called bicameral. Okay, bi meaning two. All members of the legislature, so regardless of which part of the Congress you go to, would be picked based off your state's population. Okay, everybody who is a citizen living in that state. Bigger states, in terms of population, not land size, population. Bigger states really like this plan because it means if they have a bigger population, they're automatically getting more votes in Congress. Okay, meaning that issues they support are more likely to pass through Congress. Okay, they're going to get the laws they want. The New Jersey plan is kind of the flip side of that coin. It's kind of going along with a system that was in place under the Articles of Confederation, which it's like one state, one vote, kind of, okay, or at least equal. Okay, everyone gets the equal amount of votes. They don't think we need two houses of Congress. They want to keep it all in one organization. That's called unicameral, uni meaning one, like a unicycle has one wheel. Okay. Um, Under the New Jersey plan, again, every state would get the equal amount of votes. That could mean one vote per state, or two votes per state, or seven votes per state. So long as everyone's getting the same amount, they think that's the most equal and fair way to do it. The New Jersey plan also gets a little more in depth with certain issues than the New Jersey plan does in terms of what kind of powers the national level government is given, particularly in terms of taxing, okay, and kind of enforcing those taxes. So we're changing a little bit. Instead of like what the Articles of Confederation said, where we're going to ask states for money, but we don't really have a way to force them into giving us money. The New Jersey plan would allow the national government to force those states to have a little more authority when passing taxes to ensure that those tax revenues were created. Small states, in terms of population, like this idea the best because, again, they think it's more equal. They're more likely to have a fair say in the legislative process than bigger population states who would get more votes if they just went with the Virginia plan. So, how do we reach a happy medium? Okay, these two plans and the support for these two plans equal a lot of debate. Okay, so much debate that actually the Congress stops, or not the Congress, excuse me, the convention uh, stops. They can't move forward. They're at what's called a stalemate, meaning you're stuck. Okay, the Great Compromise is what's developed to give people not the best of both worlds because rarely are compromises like that, but enough that everyone's getting enough of what they want that they can move forward. Okay, it might not be a perfect agreement, but it's workable, right? So it breaks the stalemate What happens, I would write the second bullet point down. It creates that bicameral legislature. So that's taking the idea from the Virginia plan, but we're going to tweak it a little bit. Okay, we're not going to do straight population size voting like what they want with the Virginia plan. First, we're going to create those two houses in the Senate. Okay, and these two names should sound pretty familiar to you. Okay, the Senate is called the upper house of Congress. And in the Senate, regardless of your state's population, every state gets two votes, okay, all the time. The other house is where those bigger states are going to be a little happier. In the House of Representatives, it's called the lower house, and those representatives are decided on population. So if you have a really big population in your state, you're going to get more representatives than a state that doesn't have as large of a population. Okay, so right away, we're compromising. Everyone's getting a little bit of what they want. The New Jersey plan supporters are getting their equal votes in the Senate. The Virginia plan voters are getting their population controlled votes in the House of Representatives. Okay. Something I want you to ask yourselves in regards to the House of Representatives population count. Okay. Ask yourselves these questions or this question: who in a state's population would count towards that overall population number? Okay, take the next 5 seconds with an elbow partner or someone in front of you or behind you. Ask yourselves, who do we think counts? Does everyone in the state count, regardless of age or property or skin color or gender? Okay, talk it over. 10 seconds, go. Okay, now take around 10, 15 seconds, kind of share your ideas out in the group. All right, when it comes to state level populations and who's going to count towards that final vote, there's another kind of debate, okay, and another compromise that needs to be reached. I'm curious to know if you came up with these. Slaveholding states want all of their population, so free people and enslaved people, to count towards their final population number. Because if they count the slave populations, even though they're not counted as citizens, they're not given any rights, if they count towards that population number, what happens? They get more votes in the House of Representatives, right? Okay. So if I'm a slaveholding state, I want to count slaves towards that total number. Okay. If I'm from a free state, I'm not going to like that idea at all, right? Because I think it's going to kind of cheat the system. Okay. They're going to be counted as a person just to get more Congress votes, but not as a person in any other way. They're going to be treated as property, right? Something that is taxable, something that's a way to make money. Okay. If I'm from a free state, I don't like that plan. Okay. I think it's cheating the system and it's cheating me out of congressional votes. Okay. Potentially making my congressional vote in the House of Representatives not worth as much. Okay. How do we reach a happy medium so we can move forward in our drafting of the Constitution? We come up with something called the three-fifths compromise. Okay. That's where three-fifths of a slave state's population or slave population, okay, the enslaved people, three-fifths of that total number would kind of get rounded to the nearest whole, and that would be how many votes you got. Okay, so depending on what the number was, you might get 1 to 2 extra votes. Okay, um, unless you had a really giant slave population, then it might be more than 2 votes. Okay, but you have to do that little bit of math to figure out what exactly that three-fifths meant. Okay. After we draft the Constitution, okay, we need to come up with a way to make it work. So, some things that didn't work in the Articles of Confederation were we had one branch of government, right? And that one branch of government has some limitations. This is going to change that, okay? But we have to decide what exactly we want. Some people at the convention want a really strong national government, a government with more authority, more oomph behind it than what the Articles of Confederation provided. Okay, that would mean there's a little bit of a trade off, and that state level governments would be a little weaker. They would have less authority. Okay, some people really like that idea, some people really don't. Regardless of which side of that argument you're on, you still want to protect your state's popular sovereignty. Okay, sovereignty is something we've talked about before, where it's kind of like authority of a group of people. Popular sovereignty is very close to that. It's still talking about authority, but it's talking about kind of the majority. Um, what's the majority of the decision on certain issues? Okay. Um, and popular sovereignty is this idea, again, that political power belongs to the people instead of just the government. That's a age of enlightenment type of idea. Okay, we talked about that with our last set of notes. So the convention, as they're drafting this document, they need to find that happy medium of balancing power out between a stronger national government that can be a little more effective than what they were like under the Articles of Confederation and still respect that state level sovereignty that so many people want. Okay. An idea that comes out of this, and this is something that I would ask you to talk to Mrs. Parkhill about because it is one of her favoriteest things on the planet to discuss, is federalism. Okay, federalism, a very basic definition. You're going to get more in depth with this when you study government with her as juniors and seniors. But federalism is kind of like sharing power. Okay, how does the national level government share power with state level governments? Okay, how do we divide up who does what? Something that's decided and put in the Constitution, so it's very clear, is every state level government has to obey. At the end of the day, they have to obey what the national level government decides. Okay, they have final say. But there's still some powers that the state governments get. And this is kind of a carryover from the Articles of Confederation, where it said that anything not explicitly given to the national government within that document is an assumed state power. So it's something that just kind of falls off to the state level government. All right. Another major change within the Constitution is branches of government. Okay. Review real quick, 5 seconds. How many branches of government are in the Articles of Confederation? Go. Okay. And for the good of the group, how many are there? One. There's one branch of government in the Articles of Confederation. That's not working, right? There's no court system, there's no kind of person in charge to represent the country internationally. There's just the Congress. Okay. In the Constitution, that's going to get divided out. The system of separation of powers is going to fall into something called checks and balances, which is how we're going to create more than one branch of government. But we're going to put some safeguards in to make sure not one branch is more powerful than the other. They all have to work together to get the job done. So, again, I would write this down. You need to know they create three branches. You need to know that no one branch can be too powerful. There's some type of safeguard in place. These next bullet points you could write down if you wanted to. We're going to go more in depth with them on the next couple slides, so you could skip them if you wanted. Okay, but those three branches are called the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. All right. In the legislative branch, um, does anyone know what this building is? Okay, you can talk about it for like 5 seconds. If you said that this building pictured here is the Capitol building, you're correct. The Capitol building is where the Congress meets when it's in session. Okay, um, the legislative branch is headed by Congress. Okay, Congress's main job is to make law. Okay, that can be making brand new law, that can be changing existing law. Okay, but if it's to do with making law, it's a congressional deal. Also, during the lawmaking process, you'll get this on the next slide, but there's a way that bills, which is a law that's not quite an official law yet, um, that gets passed off for final approval. There's a way that can get rejected. And if enough Congress people get together and vote, um, they can override that rejection and still get that bill passed. Okay? Um, but you need that two-thirds majority in order for that to happen. So that's pretty difficult to do today. You need a lot of cooperation within Congress. And sometimes that doesn't work so well. The executive branch is the next branch of government, and its job is to carry out the laws. So you get the laws from the legislative branch. The executive branch has to make those laws work. Okay. The person in charge of the executive branch at the very top is the President of the United States. The president will appoint different people uh, within his government or administration to head up different departments, is what they're called lots of times. It's a way to kind of split his job up. If the president had to do every single thing by themselves every day, they'd get nothing done. It'd be way too hard. So they need these departments to take on specific topics. Things like the Secretary of the Treasury is a department, Secretary of Agriculture, Education, Health and Human Services, um, all of that. Okay. It's a way to break up the job and ensure that laws are being carried out to protect those areas of public need and public interest. Okay. He makes sure laws are carried out, and he also makes laws official. So when a proposed law gets through Congress, it's called a bill. Okay. It's only after that bill is signed and made official that it's called a law. It's the president's job to make a bill a law. Okay. If he doesn't like something in a bill, okay, it's not clear enough, or he doesn't like the way it's written, or he just doesn't like it for whatever reason, it's a policy he doesn't want to support, he can reject that bill, and that's called a veto. Okay, there's a couple different types of veto. We're not going to talk about them in this class. You'll talk about them when you are taking government with Mrs. Parkhill, but they all mean the same thing. They're all a way to reject a bill. Okay, the last branch of government we are talking about, the last one that is written in the Constitution, is the judicial branch. Okay, and the judicial branch establishes the court systems. I've got a flow chart here off to one side of the slide. You don't need to memorize that, but it does show how different uh, levels of the court system work. Somewhat, there are ways to kind of jump steps depending on the severity of the case. Um, but this is just kind of a basic view. Anytime you see judicial, I think it's easier to remember that it creates the court system because it looks like judge. Okay, you've probably heard that before, um, but if you haven't, that's that's kind of a brain trick a lot of people use. Okay, you think judge, you think court. The highest court, it's in this flow chart, it's in your notes. You need to write this down. The highest level court is the United States Supreme Court. Okay, each state in the country has a Supreme Court, but the United States Supreme Court is the tippy top. Okay, it is the highest level you can get to. There's nothing above it. The job of the judicial branch, so at every level of the court system, is to interpret law. Okay. At the national level, that's usually deciding are existing state level laws or even existing national level laws. Are they constitutional? Do they apply to the Constitution as it fits our lives today? Okay. We'll talk about a couple of different Supreme Court cases by the time this year is over. You're going to see examples of a Supreme Court that makes a decision based on how um, times have changed, and you're going to see, and a lot of those decisions are pretty popular, at least in today's view. But you're also going to see some examples that I think are missed calls. Calls that are viewed to be pretty negative that allow for systems of um, prejudice and discrimination to survive a lot longer than they maybe would have had a different court been in session. Okay, but regardless of whether we like their decision or not, they're interpreting based off their experience and what they think the law is saying. Does it fit the Constitution? Okay, just like any other court, they also are there to punish criminals, people who have broken the law. And they also, at the national Supreme Court level, the United States Supreme Court level, will interpret and settle disputes between states. Okay, and that they start to reference that in the Articles of Confederation, but instead of electing just 9 people from the states to settle this dispute, this is establishing a court that's going to be a little more permanent than just pick 9 guys. All right, so a very quick recap. We've decided issues on how we're getting representation to different levels of, or different houses, excuse me, of Congress. We've set up separation of powers by creating those 3 branches, each with their own specific job. How do we take that document and make it something official? Okay. That process is gonna be mostly the same as what it was under the Articles of Confederation, with one significant change. Okay. Um, I would write this down as a reminder. Okay. The Constitution needs to be ratified. Okay. Take 10 seconds with an elbow partner, review what ratification means. Now take 5 seconds, really quick. Someone share it out for the good of the group. Check for understanding before we move on. Does ratification mean official approval of a policy or document? Yes, yes, it does. It's official approval. Okay. This constitution, this new document that's going to set up the government, needs to be officially approved. Okay. So there's no fight about it later, hopefully. Okay. Unlike the Articles of Confederation, this does not need to be a unanimous decision. Okay, we've learned our lesson and realized a unanimous decision is pretty hard to come by. What we need instead is a 2/3 majority in favor of ratification. Okay, this is a 2/3 majority of people within Congress. That's who's making the law. So that's who would be voting on this. But then it also needs to go to the state level governments. Okay, and you need a 2/3 majority of those states to vote yes as well. Okay, so it's kind of a twofold approval. In 1787, when this document was completed, that meant 9 of the 13 original states had to vote yes. Okay, in order to get those 9, and eventually they get all 13, but in order to get that approval of all the states, okay, they don't get that right away. They think some state level governments think that was what was in the Articles of the Constitution still wasn't enough. Okay, um, yes, it set up a government. Yes, it explained job requirements and how long you could serve in certain jobs and all of that, but it doesn't specifically state rights of everyday Americans. Okay, who does this apply to? What kind of freedom exactly do we have? Okay, so people at the convention make some changements. They tack on a list. Okay, and that list is the Bill of Rights. Okay, and this is what convinces those first nine states that yes, we can sign off on this document and make it official. Okay, you absolutely need to note this, write this down. The Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments, and an amendment is an official change. Okay, so we've got a couple of different official terms here. We've got ratification is official approval. We've got amendment, which is official change. Okay, Bill of Rights are amendments, they're changes, okay, that we've put into the Constitution. The purpose of the Bill of Rights, again, I would write this down, it's in bold. I guarantee you need to know this. The purpose of the Bill of Rights is to clearly state different rights and ways we're going to protect those rights of citizens. Okay, this isn't national versus state level government. This is every citizen. Also, as they're writing the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, they write in a way to amend the Constitution in the future. Okay, the fact that they were able to think and say, we're going to need more of these. These probably will need to get added to or maybe even removed as time goes on. We need to write a process in um, to keep this document functional. Okay, so in another 10 years, we don't need to come back to a meeting like this and write a whole nother document that's going to change the government. Okay, we're going to make it easier to change. Okay. Some final stats about the Constitution. You're not going to need to memorize these years, but I want you to see around how long this took. Okay, so the Constitution, just the articles of the Constitution, the thing that's setting up the government and job descriptions and all of that, are three branches. That is written in September of 1787 and it goes through Congress. Okay? It's what's trying to get ratified by those first nine states. It's ratified after we pass or add the Bill of Rights in June 1788, and then all states, all 13, will ratify the document by, and it's at different times for different states. It's not like it's one random vote. This happens at individual meetings at state level legislatures. Um, but they all ratify the document. So it's the articles plus the first 10 amendments by May of 1790. So it wasn't an immediate process, but it also wasn't like the government was at a complete standstill for a bunch of time before this was made official. Okay. All right. Thank you for sticking with it. That's our notes. That's the whole set of notes. Um, If you've got any questions, if anything's not super clear, send me an email and I will answer it when I can. If I can't answer it face to face right away, I don't know how long away I will be gone. Other than that, make sure your Write Like a Historian is turned in. Make sure your primary source deep dig from uh, Monday is turned in. Um, Make sure your PCQ and exit ticket are turned in, and I will see you later. Have a great day.